Ei, viva professor. Gravei um vídeo que é para lhe mostrar como a apresentação funciona, que estou aqui ainda a acabar uns detalhes e a ensaiar. Fiz isto com um software que tem uma série de animações. Eu vou passar agora pela apresentação por alto e mostrar ao professor um pouco o que penso mostrar lá. Ainda nem ensaiei o que vou dizer exatamente, mas vou até experimentar agora ir passando pelos slides e falando já em inglês sobre a apresentação. So, my name is Miguel Residor, and I'm here to speak about my article, The Role of Best Practices in Accessing Software Quality, in this case open source software. And wait, this is not working, I don't know why. Yes, it's now. So, about open source, we are all here adepts of open source, so I believe you already know that open source is a success, but if there's any doubt, we have a lot of projects like Android, Apache that with no doubt we know that there's a lot of very good open source projects. And nowadays you can find a lot of projects in different website repositories, and for instance SourceForge, it's one of the most recognized ones, but in the last years GitHub have a lot of projects, and a lot of people migrated their projects to GitHub, so it's on a radar, and it's the new kid on the block. And and that's why we chose GitHub for our study, but I'll speak about that later. One of the things we believe it's important, it's because there's so many open source software, and not all the software is made with big groups or big companies like Apache or Ubuntu or wherever. It's open source, but most of the time they have big companies in the backstage. We can have a question: how can we measure the quality of open source software projects? And that's really important when you think about smaller projects that few developers are developing it, and if you want to use it and you don't have the time to, because not all the users are informatics computer science specialists. And in this context, we propose best practices in software development as a way to improve the quality assessment. And I'm going to try to explain why we think that's a good solution for that. Lots of software can be found in those repositories, and the process of software development, open source software, it's a little bit different from normal software, because open source communities, we believe they work in a kind of a bazaar style. There's lots of articles about this theory. Normal software development process is similar to building cathedrals, and the open source is more chaotic and resembles the babbling bazaar. But that means that it's confusion, but it works. The shock is that in fact bazaar style seems to work. But still, we need to measure the quality of those projects. And if they are small projects, few developers, no one knows it, we should have an automatic way to measure those projects. And one of the obvious things is that the traditional metrics on software are not maybe the best ones for open source software. Because I believe one of the most important characteristics in open source software when you're trying to measure quality attributes is the maintainability. Because even the features, they change all the time. You have developers everywhere, so someone wants this feature, another feature, and you can fork the project, create your own fork. The most important thing is for the project to be highly maintainable, so that new people can come to the project, and if you follow best practices, we believe that it's easier for a newcomer to enter the project and help it and develop it. So traditional metrics, lines of code, there's cyclomatic complexity, fan-ins, fan-outs, that's the usual thing. We are proposing best practice, but best practices are not formal rules. It's more like recommendations and things that the majority or the community or the coding superstars, the best people coding in that language or that framework believes that is best and is doing it. So they are constantly exchanging. It's what the community believes. And we think that by measuring if a project is following the current best practices, this can assess their quality. And the question is, are best practices and open source quality truly related? And we believe so, and we did a study to go into that. So we did our study in GitHub, and you can see here that's GitHub website. I believe you all already know GitHub. I can tell you that there's different languages like JavaScript, Ruby, Python are the majority of the languages. You can almost every project in GitHub use those languages, and that's an important thing because we are going to access that. And I presented myself in the beginning, but my name is Miguel Residor, and I want to speak just a little bit about me. So why have I choose Rails? And I'm just assessing that in Rails. In truth, I'm not really Miguel Residor. My name is Carlos Doutor, my last and first, but my full name is really big, but I prefer Miguel Residor. It's because I prefer my mom. However, I do a lot of things, and also I started a startup, Group Buddies. It's an academic spin-off, and we use Rails most of the time. If you want to know more about that, you can go to Residor and you have the links. But at Group Buddies, we have now some clients, and all the websites we are doing, it's most of the things in Ruby on Rails. And just to tell, Ruby on Rails is not a language. Ruby is a programming language. Ruby on Rails is a framework, and it has the DRY principle, the MVC. I could speak more about that, but I don't have the time here. So because of all that, I decided to measure best practices in projects on GitHub done in Ruby on Rails, because I know about that. And I try to see if when they follow the best practices, they are really good projects. So I found a gem. Someone already started doing some work. The Rails Best Practice is a website created by Hoover. It's a Japanese guy, and he was inspired in a talk he saw. I have some text here, yes, to remember me. Flyers, and so that's the story about it. He started writing a gem after he saw the presentation of Hoover in 2009, the Kung Fu Rails Conf in Shanghai, China. And this gem is really awesome. Although the website, it tries to get together a community, and people say what they think that are best practices, and then they vote in those best practices. And for instance, this is an example of a page of a website. Here they are saying that when you create a migration in Rails, you should not put the data on that, like the seed data. Those things should go to DB seeds, which is a different script. So the thing is, the community here talk about the best practices, they vote for it, and then someone is building a gem that really goes to the project and check if those best practices are being followed by a given project. So the gem already existed when I started doing that, and I went to look into the code. I even found some bugs, and I forked it, and I did some commits. I'm now helping the Japanese guy. The thing is, it's only spotting the occurrences of the errors, so I don't have many metrics about that. So my study and how we started it, if you read the article, what we did first, I tried to count the occurrences of those errors, and I tried to see, in my opinion, if the best projects had less errors. And at the beginning, the results weren't much of what I was expecting, but in a moment I noticed that, oh, maybe that's because some projects are bigger than others, and if the project is smaller or bigger, it's obvious that it's not going to have the same amount of errors. So then I divided the project, the number of errors depending on the size of the project, and I had better results. But like in the first review of the article, many of you said, oh, how do you tell that they are really good or bad projects? You need to find some way more sure of doing that. So I tried to find another thing, and I thought, why not? I'm doing this on GitHub, so I think maybe I could find some kind of simple metric, a reputation metric. And I thought about followers and forks. Followers means that a project can have people following a project. It's like people that favorited the project. And forks is people that is forking the project, and because they want to contribute or create another project from it. And I find, oh, I should try to figure out if when the project has many errors, is there any relation between the NBPs and the followers and forks of a project? The NBPs is what I call it it's like not a best practices, because the gem does not really, it measures the quality of the project, but instead the errors that it has. So I started a second study, and for that I run the jam in a lot of projects. This time more projects, 60 projects, and instead of dividing by a single size like I have done in the beginning, because I dig into the code of the jam to correct some bugs it had, I found that it was the way they built the jam. It's easy to know for each best practices how many files are being considered. Because, for instance, some errors only occur in HTML files, so the project can have as many errors on that as many files it has. It doesn't depend really on the size of the project, because if it's a big project but it has no HTML files, it will have no errors related to HTML files. So it shouldn't have like a big score, because it doesn't have errors in files that it doesn't have. And we did that, and I created a big table containing all the data I recovered, and here is that table. I can show in more detail. What I'm doing now is I build a program that I give a URL, and I download the project from GitHub, and then I retrieve a lot of information like the forks, the watchers, and even more information that can be used in the future. Like some important information is the date of the last commit, the date when the project was created. Because if the project was created yesterday, it will not have followers or forks, even if it's a good project. It doesn't matter. And I measure all those metrics, and I divided the number of errors for the metrics, and even then I inverse the score, and I can get a score rank 1 to 5, like a star system. But the conclusions, then I try to find correlations between the forks and the watchers and those results. And the truth is that I had a really good result here, because you can see there is a strong correlation between forks and the total MVPs. It doesn't happen when I don't divide it by the size, so you truly have to divide it by the size. But so they are related, and I concluded that it's truly related. So by measuring the best practices and use this gem, and this gem is created by the community opinion, it is constantly changing. What gem says it's good, it's really what people is forking and watching. So all that makes sense, and I believe that with all this information I can try to add more variables, like checking the last time and adding different weights to the different metrics and all that stuff. And there's lots of information I can do, and not only this I can do, but then I can create a system, what I'm calling now Gorgeous Code, that can automatically measure any project in GitHub and tell you if it's a good project or a bad project. And it can also spot the errors and tell what you should correct or not, all that stuff. And that's it, I think. E pronto, eu ainda não ensaiei bem isto, foi a primeira vez que fiz, mas é mais ou menos isto. Não sei agora como é que vos vou enviar esta gravação. Eu aqui falei bastante rápido, isto só me demorou mais ou menos 15 minutos, mas há mais pontos que posso falar, principalmente quando estiver ali na tabela. Eu acho que há mais pontos que posso falar. Ainda vou trabalhar agora, se calhar, mais qualquer coisa na apresentação, também preparar isto mais. Agora estou em Lisboa e vou no fim de semana para cima, para Braga. Se vocês tiverem tempo de ver este vídeo e mandarem sugestões, enviem-me e eu depois faço qualquer coisa. Pronto, obrigado, professores. Espero que se tenham divertido no Brasil. Um abraço. Até breve.